Today we're going back in time along the whiskey vortex. That sentence started really well and then fell apart pretty fast. Today we're looking at a really old Jim Beam, which is going to be exciting. Now, I've already opened this bottle, and as I was taking the sort of plastic wrapper off of it, I was thinking, if this comes up on auction in 20 years' time and it's worth like £1 million, I swear to God, I'm going to like headbutt the pavement is what I'm going to do. I've already been looking at both bottles, and obviously with the amount of time that has taken place between the two, there are some differences, but I wanted to point some of them out because they are interesting. So, whilst the whiskey is getting used to its new environment, it's going to need a bit of time. It's been in this bottle for 20 years longer than I've been alive. So it needs a minute. So we're going to give it a minute. We're going to give it several minutes, actually. It's already been in there for about 5. We're going to try and give it another few and see what we get. Now then, the most obvious thing between the two is that this label is a lot more homespun, as a lot of them were. But you know what, I'd be tempted to say that if it's not hand-drawn... Do you know what, no, I'm going to say it's hand-drawn. I'm going to say that this one is... I mean, obviously, they've not done every one individually, but, you know, somebody's come along, designed the label on a bit of graph paper or something, and I think the logo is the only bit that's seen a computer, and some of the text on the side, but I think the majority of it, somebody has actually written, by the looks of it, because there are certain imperfections on it, and it makes it all that more endearing. I like that. I could be wrong. I don't really know why you would create a font that looks like that, but again, I could be wrong. It looks homely, let's put it that way, whereas this one is pretty generic sort of marketing label. Now, side by side, they look like they've evolved from one another, because they have. It's just that this is more sort of a cleaner Photoshop version of this, because people's tastes have evolved, and that's the kind of thing that they want their whiskey to look like. It inspires confidence in them. Or some bullshit, I don't know. Bizarrely, this one has all the faces of the Jim Beam family. All 7 generations are on there. This one doesn't, but it does have a lot of writing instead, so I'm actually going to read that out to you, because I'm stalling for time. So we have Jim Beam, is an old-fashioned whiskey made and aged in the old-fashioned way and distilled under a formula passed on from generation to generation since 1795. The distinctive flavour and delicate mellow character are absolutely natural, and the whiskey is bottled from the original barrels at the distillery. So I'm assuming that they're basically saying that they don't fiddle around with it too much. I mean, obviously, you know, they add water to dilute it down, but there's no actual noting of, like, anything in terms of, like, filtering and colour. I mean, because it's a Kentucky straight bourbon, there is a particular kind of filtration, charcoal filtration, if memory serves. I'm sure people will be correcting me if I'm wrong, though. So, what I normally like to do, actually, if somebody completely proves me wrong, I'll pin it, because I'm like, well, there you go. That's important information. I'm not one of these people that's like, oh, you dare to disagree, because I'm happy with the size of my penis, as are other people. One notable thing about this, actually, which I can't find on this one, this has an age statement. I know, right? So this states that the whiskey is 52 months old. It's a very strange way of putting an age statement on that, but that would make it tickle over 4... Would that make it 5 years? Would that make it 5 years? No, it wouldn't. It's no. 12 times 5 is 60, John. So it's, yeah, it's a little bit over 4 years. There we go. Wow, I struggle with my math. I couldn't do 12 times 5 then. Bloody hell, John. On the other side, it's almost like an advert. Jim Beam, genuine Beam whiskey. Bear these signatures, and then it's got the signature of James B. Beam and Jeremiah Beam, representing the 5th and 6th generation of a family famous as distillers since 1795. They're really keen on letting you know that it's 1795. Both 50ml. And do you know what, actually? Oh, no, that is on there as well. They both declare that they're from Claremont. And they both still have the non-genuine without my signature and James B. Beam at the bottom there. It's interesting to see kind of like how it's changed and how it's not. Jim Beam is one of those examples of a brand that it gets tidied up. It doesn't get changed. There are some brands that never change, like McDonald's. They've always had like the gold, apart from like the first logo, which, to be fair, most people's first logo is a mess. I mean, I know mine was, but they've always had the golden arches. And I think like in the 2000s they tried to add like a bit of 3D, and then they took it back away again a few years later when they were like, nah, it doesn't look right. So they've done like little tidying bits, but they never totally changed it. Coca-Cola, another one. By comparison, let's use both rivals. Burger King and Pepsi have had radical departures from their logos. So you get that with like radical rebrands, which is, you know, sort of an attention grab, versus ones that are confident enough that they don't need it. It just gets a bit of a tidy up to get your attention again, but without, you know, you're still familiar with it. It still gives you the idea that, you know, there's a continuation on from what has previously been there. Johnnie Walker's an unusual hybrid of the two in that it's changed quite substantially, but also kept the same idea. They're an odd kind of outlier in that respect. The biggest difference between this is glass, and this is the finest plastic money will buy. And also the bottles are significantly smaller, partly because this is glass, it's thicker. I'd imagine also just because it's smaller, it's cheaper to produce. And the lids are different colours, white, black. Kind of makes sense with it being white, given that this is I mean, I don't think it actually says white label anywhere, does it? Maybe it's just me that calls it Jim Beam White. I'm weird for doing that, aren't I? Because that's definitely not what this is called, now I think about it. And there is actually a lot more black accents on this. It's bordered, the lids change colour, and there is like this bit at the bottom which is absent. So there's my comparison of the bottles. TLDR, they've changed. So, let's put that one there, and that one there. Now then, I've still got the new Jim Beam from when I reviewed it, and this is the old Jim Beam. Now then, you might be able to tell me the first immediate difference. They are orders of magnitude different colours. The old Jim Beam is way darker, and the new Jim Beam is very light. Now, we don't have an age statement on the Jim Beam. I do believe that there is a minimum aging requirement for bourbon whiskey, as there is with pretty much all whiskies. I don't know it off the top of my head, unfortunately, so there'll be a thing. There we go. I could have stopped this and then gone and looked it up, but to hell with it, I'll be, you know, honest instead. So, the first things first, I'm going to quickly do a refresher of the current Jim Beam, so much lighter, really sweet and corn-led on the nose, like toasted cereal notes as well. Cornflakes, I think, was the one of the comparisons I used last time. And a little bit vegetal as well, like elements of aloe vera, a little bit like Nivea hand cream on there as well. There's a fair bit of spice, a little bit of cinnamon, cardamom, super corn-rich. It's a bowl of cornflakes, if you put like a little bit of like cinnamon in there as well, which actually sounds delightful. So that's that one, but yeah, it is sort of liquid cornflakes, this one. Not gonna lie, actually really pleasant as a sipper. Bourbon is really teaching Scotch how to do a cheap and just a well-made whiskey, you know? I get now why so many people vibe with bourbons. They do cheap and nice way better than we do. We do cheap and nasty. They do not. On to the old stuff, or the sacrilege drop, if you prefer, I suppose. The colour is really enticing. It's a deep, dark amber colour, whereas obviously we've got more of like a light gold colour with that one. I think I did describe that one as amber previously, but I mean, looking in this, I'm willing to revise that down to light gold or medium gold. Oh, okay, there's the there's the old bottle effect. It's a very distinctive smell, old bottle effect. It comes across as kind of like dusty library books. I mean, first thing on the nose is it's way sharper. There's much more of like a ethanol fume kind of a... Fighting past that is a totally different liquid. It's way close to like wheat. I almost want to say Weetabix, actually, if we're sticking with like breakfast cereals. Yeah, it's like more of an oat and wheat kind of a nose on that. It's got a little bit of like white pepper in there as well. I'm getting no notes of sweetness. It's a much drier smell. I know that dryness is an indication of sweetness, but you know how like you can smell honey and your brain kind of fills in the gaps? Now that I'm nosing it a bit more, there's kind of like a stewed strawberry kind of a smell. Sage and fresh mint, like mint that you've grown yourself. Remind me a little bit of, okay, this one's a weird one. It's reminding me a little bit of if you just chopped celery. Kind of like chlorophyll-y, watery smell that it gives. I know water doesn't smell necessarily, but you get what I mean. It's got that kind of like green vegetal aroma. It's quite subtle. And if I'm completely honest, it's reminding me a little bit of pickled onions. There is a vinegary, oniony kind of a... I wouldn't say it's an off note. That's the bizarrest thing about it. It's almost like essence of pickled onion without sort of the hit of acid. That probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but now that it's breaking down a little bit, there is a little bit of vanilla coming through as well, close to like a sarsaparilla kind of a note. There's a lot going on. Whereas this one was deceptively simple. Well, not even deceptively simple. It was simple. Nice, but simple. This, I suspect, is going to be a lot more challenging. Dare I say, less likeable. Caramel, coriander, a little bit of popcorn, cayenne spice in there as well. Think of a capsicum in there. Bizarre dairy component in there, almost like evaporated milk. And then as the caramel notes come through, it kind of turns into fudge in the palate. All of these herbal spicy notes come out as well. The white pepper's not really there, but again, there is this like full fat milk. Or actually, I'm going to say gold top, actually. Really heavy, lactic, buttery quality to it. At the end, there's like this weird vegetal note. It's almost absent, but it's just about there. What I will say is that this is also quite simple, but in totally different ways from how this one is simple. They have no resemblance to one another in terms of flavour. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. This is way more spice and vegetable and herbal. This is much more sweet, light, corn-led, whereas this is a bit more kind of like wheat and oat and barley kind of a flavour. It's a curious kind of like cranberry sauce kind of an element going on as well. It's kind of like this bittersweet sort of a thing going on. It's fascinating to see the comparison between the two. They're radically different. Radically different. Now, I'm not saying that you will get the opportunity to pick up a Jim Beam White Label, although, because again, not exactly a rare whiskey when it was bottled in the 70s, it does mean that there will still be a fair few of them kicking around, so you might be able to get a bottle of it for pretty reasonable money, despite the fact that it is, coming up to 50 years old at this point. In fact, surpassing 50 years old if it's young enough, but pretty extraordinary. It's fascinating to do them side by side. Unlike a lot of the vintage whiskies that I've done so far, it's best done in comparison to its younger cousin. Or its descendant, I suppose you could word it as well. I'm not sure if it's worthy of drinking on its own. I don't think it does enough that's interesting that you couldn't get from a modern whiskey. And that's kind of what you're looking for with a vintage whiskey. You want to see how the old guard did it better, really. There is always that kind of like, things were better off in the olden days. Not always. There's a few things that they did, 30, 40 years ago that are not better than today. Nuclear reactors comes immediately to mind. I mean, I think both of the Category 7s we had are of older generation designs. Admittedly, both were also bogged down in politics, and that's the main reason they exploded, but still. Well, I mean, in one case, a wall of water smashed into it, but I mean, fair enough. Where was I going with that? Yeah, so, older doesn't always necessarily mean better. I think that's my takeaway from this. But anyway, those are my thoughts on old Jim Beam versus modern Jim Beam. Was this interesting? Let me know down below, because I do have a few other bottles that I can do comparisons of if you are so inclined or interested. Give me your thoughts as well. Are you old enough to have drank older generations of Jim Beam? Have you noticed over the years that the quality has changed? I wouldn't say the quality has declined. Personally, I wouldn't say the quality has declined, because they're both of a good quality. It's just how they deliver that quality is so radically different, it's ridiculous. Which is weird, because in the previous video we talked about how there's been a lot of efforts for consistency, but then when you do them side by side, the proof's not there. It's interesting. Is that all because it's been in the bottle for 40, 50 years at this point? I'm not saying it won't have had an effect. It definitely has had an effect because, again, old bottle effect is a thing and you can definitely detect it on this. But let me know down below. Would you be fascinated to see more of these kind of vintage showdowns? Showdowns? Yeah, let's say showdown. Let's pretend we're sorted food for a second. Thumb this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more vintage whiskey shenanigans, because I've got a little bit of a collection. That's not bragging, it's all, you know, stuff that was going cheap that nobody else wanted, so, you know, keep it interesting, I suppose. I'd love to say, oh yeah, I've got a Glenlivet from the 50s or something like that. I don't, sorry. But subscribe anyway, because, you know. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and do join me next time, where I'll be drinking something else.